Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the On Cloud X4. So 3 things to like with this model is number 1, it's a really good generalist training shoe. So if you're a lot more casual with your cross training and your HIIT and your strength workouts, and you like to incorporate even some short runs, the Cloud X4 can be a good pick for those needs. This model is flexible through the forefoot, so it gives you a lot of maneuverability and play for HIIT and multi-directional workouts. And it's also stable enough for some light strength stuff. So if you do need that more generalist training shoe for more casual stuff, the On Cloud X4 can be a good option, especially for those who generally like On shoes and that Cloud Tech midsole appearance. The second pro that I have with this shoe is the forefoot does feel a little bit more flexible in this shoe compared to the prior iterations. So something I picked up on with this model is it feels a little bit more sporty, both on the feet and with the flexibility of the Speedboard in this shoe. So this model has a reworked Speedboard from what I can understand, and I think it does feed into giving the shoe a little bit more flexibility through the forefoot. So if you are big on doing things like jump rope, box jump, any form of HIIT workout where you're heavy on the forefoot, I think this model will feel pretty good for your needs, especially for my folks out there who like a lot more plushness in their shoes midsole. The third pro that I have with the Cloud X4 is it's pretty comfortable for all day wear. So we have a breathable mesh upper in this shoe, and it's pretty dang lightweight. So if you do need that singular training shoe that you can rock for travel, so you want that one shoe to wear all day for walking around, traveling to the airport, but then also wearing to the hotel gym to get a workout in, that's where the Cloud X4 can excel. It's not going to be your best shoe for pushing your workouts in a more serious context. I'll talk about that in my cons, but for a shoe that works really well in a lot of different contexts, but also feels good on the feet all day, especially when walking, this model can excel. And then to add to that comfort note, with the Cloud X3, I found the boot to be a little bit harsh at times, as in the boot could kind of cut into your ankle because there wasn't a ton of padding. This model's tongue and boot have a bit more padding, which is why I also like this model a little bit better than the Cloud X3 for all day wear. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with the Cloud X4. So 3 cons that I have with the Cloud X4 is number 1, this is still not going to be your best training shoe for pushing your strength or your more serious cross training sessions. And now to elaborate there, with this Cloud Tech midsole in this shoe, it's stable enough for light to moderate lifting sessions, but when you start pushing anything over like 315 pounds, that's when I start to notice this midsole compress. Even when doing barbell reverse lunges with 185 pounds, I was noticing how much compression you get with this model's midsole. So if you're looking for max stability, that is not going to be the Cloud X4. And then in the context of why I don't necessarily love them for more serious cross training sessions is with this model's upper. It works decently well for like skater strides and some things, but I think some folks will notice a little bit of spillover in the shoe, and with this more plush midsole, because you have these breaks here, what I find, and this has been in every single On shoe to date, especially the Cloud X models that I do use more for cross training, is you start to get a little bit of lateral compression here. So if you're not being really conscious of your landing, you can kind of like tip over in the shoe with its midsole, even though it does kind of flare out. And I think if you're a heavier set individual, this is going to be even more prominent. So definitely keep that in mind if you do invest in the Cloud X4. The second con that I have with the shoe is they still have this really ugly issue down here with the upper material folding because of this like X lacing system. In both models here, don't mind the coffee stain there. I spilled coffee on my shoe the other day. I'm very sad about it still. But if you lace up this bottom forefoot here, you start to get this overlap material. I really thought they would have fixed that in this model because it was something that was so glaringly weird in the Cloud X3. It's just one of those aesthetic things that I don't necessarily love. You can kind of feel it start to press into the top of the foot. So that is not necessarily my favorite feature with this shoe. And if you're really big on having an aesthetic shoe or just not having that overlap, because some training shoes can have that issue similar to this model, that would definitely be something to consider. The third con that I have with this model is, look, if you have a flatter foot, you're going to want to stay clear of this shoe. This model has a bit more arch support, and if you have a flat midfoot, you hate any form of arch in your training shoes, steer clear of this shoe. That's kind of stereotypical with On models. I don't find them to be the widest. Now, I have an E to double E with foot with a normal arch, and this model does fit my foot very well, but you do pick up on that arch, and I can start to pick up on that on my medial midfoot. So definitely food for thought there for my flatter foot folks out there. If you have an exceptionally wide foot, you might also want to steer clear of this shoe, and that I think will also feed more into that spillover issue shoe I was just talking about, because if you're pushing this upper past its thresholds, I think that is going to be way more prominent for your context. But now let's talk about the performance of the Cloud X4. This is Maui, and he has asked me to tell you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is linked down below. It is a newsletter very similar to the Morning Brew, but focused on workout shoes and fitness. I try to pack it full of information, and I will never spam you. But all that said, let's get back to the review. Thank you. One kibble for every subscriber. So in breaking down the performance of the Cloud X4, I'll discuss how this shoe does for lifting, cross-training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, this model is once again going to be best served for your more beginners, your more intermediates, or folks who are not necessarily pushing their strength to the upper echelon in the gym. So for context here, I would say probably cap your loading to about 315 pounds in the shoe if you're doing like barbell deadlifts, barbell squats, and honestly, if you're doing single leg work, you might want to limit that even further. Again, I was picking up on compression in this shoe when doing barbell reverse deficit lunges at 185 pounds. You start to feel this compress, you'll start to feel a little bit uneasy, and I think if you're doing heavy single leg work, that would also be something to consider. Despite this platform running wider than the base of this shoe, you will start to have this CloudTec Helion foam start to compress on you. Again, it is not the most stable. And so all that said, I would say if you do invest in the Cloud X4, just make sure you understand that it's not going to be your most lifting focused model. There are much better training shoes on the market for that, and I have endless amounts of content on that. But as a just general training shoe for strength work, this model can work. You get enough grip on the outsole too for machines and different surfaces. So for my more generalist folks, this model will work just fine. When it comes to cross training, I like the shoe better than the Cloud X3. It feels a lot more lively and more flexible through the forefoot. I also like the additional padding around the boot and the tongue. It gives this model a much more comfortable fit. And with this reworked mesh, it does feel a little bit more spacious and breathable than the Cloud X3's material. So I do also like that change. Now again, I'm not a huge fan of the overlap down here, but in the context of just general breathability and fit, the upper does do a pretty good job. And then when it comes to its overall responsiveness, I like the bounce you get with this shoe, especially for things like jump rope and box jump. I think if you're very heavily dominant on the forefoot with your training, this model can be a great pick. And honestly, it's like one of those shoes that I would describe being really great for class style workouts where you're doing some lifting, some jumping, and then even some short runs. That's where the Cloud X4 I think excels the most. My issues with this model for cross training once again is that I think spillover can be an issue for some context because this midsole will compress. And then also with the upper construction, it doesn't give you the most security despite being better than the Cloud X3. So if you're big on having that very sock-like, snug, secure fit in your shoes, this might also not be the best option for you. When talking about short runs, the shoe does an okay job. It's one of those shoes that I would say is like almost like a pseudo hybrid training shoe, and that's kind of how I label this shoe in my head when I'm putting shoes into different performance buckets. But this model can work for short interval runs. They're comfortable enough for 2 to 3-ish miles, but I wouldn't necessarily run longer in this model. I would go for something that's a bit more plush or more responsive because this midsole can start to add up regarding its density. So all that said, if you're planning to just do some pre and post casual miles, this model can work. I think it will also be best served for folks who have a forefoot to midfoot strike. If you're a heel striker, you might not find this model to be the most comfortable, but it's definitely a little bit more runnable than other training shoes on the market that are much more lifting focused. When it comes to daily wear, the shoe does a pretty good job. I like the overall comfort you get with the shoe, and the upper does feel more breathable. Plus, with this model, something that I like with it is with the more padded mesh tongue here, and because there's a gusset, it doesn't slide around a lot, so I'll typically wear the shoe looser and just slide my foot in and out when I am just rocking these out to run errands, grab coffee, walk the dog, etc., and then wear to the gym. And so if you're similar and you want that training shoe that can be comfortable for walking and high volume all day wear, this shoe can be a really good bet. And so all that said, let's take you to the report card. For lifting, I would give this shoe a 7 out of 10, and that's understanding and realizing that this model is not necessarily designed for heavy lifting, so I do cut it a little bit of slack there. When it comes to cross training, I would give this shoe a 7.5 out of 10. That's its primary use, and honestly, there are shoes that I think outperform it. This model has that nice aesthetic and on kind of feel to it, but when it comes to serious performance, this shoe I think does start to fall short in certain contexts. When it comes to short runs, I would also give this shoe a 7.5 out of 10. It's not the most uncomfortable training shoe for running, and you could definitely rock them for short runs. And then for daily wear, I would give this shoe an 8 out of 10. It's very comfortable, it has enough breathability, and I do like the reworked padded boot and tongue in this model compared to its predecessors. When it comes to the price of the On Cloud X4, you can expect to pay $150. This is consistent with the prior On Cloud X model, so that should not come as a surprise to you. Again, if you're a generalist and you want that shoe for cross training, some light strength work, and then also daily wear, I think the price point can make sense, especially if you're already an On fan. However, if you're someone somebody that needs that shoe for serious cross training, heavy lifting, the price point is going to be a miss because these will not perform, I think, at the threshold that you are likely looking for. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the On Cloud X4? Number one, if you are somebody that wants that training shoe that you can travel with, that feels comfortable on your feet all day for long walks and all day wear and standing and whatnot, the Cloud X4 can be a good option to look into. Number two, if you're somebody that needs that training shoe that has a heavy HIIT class and cross-training focused bias, and you also like to sprinkle in some short runs and some lifting on a weekly basis, but you're not super serious with those training verticals, this can be a great option to look into. And then number three, if you're somebody that likes a really lightweight and flexible shoe with a bit of arch support, this can be a great option to explore. Now, who should pass on this model? Number one, if you're somebody that needs a training shoe for heavy lifting, CrossFit, or serious cross training, I would say probably pass on the Cloud X4. There are a lot of great options out there that will outperform this shoe. Number two, if you are somebody with a flat foot, pass on this model. The arch in this model is going to feel uncomfortable for your needs. And then number three, this is very niche, but if you train a lot outdoors and especially on surfaces with rocks and whatnot and sticks, this model can pick that up. With the Cloud Tech midsole, this is pretty stereotypical with some of the On models, so keep that in mind. It's something that also plagues the Nike Free Metcon 6, and it's a very specific thing. And so if that does sound like you, I would say probably go for a training shoe with a full rubber outsole. That way you never really have to deal with that and they will last longer. So when discussing the sizing and fit of the On Cloud X4, I think if you have a narrow, medium, and slightly wider foot width, you should be safe going true to size in this model. The length runs true per the size chart, and the width is what I would describe as being much more medium, but can work for slightly wider feet. That is what I would describe my feet. So I have an E to double E foot width, and I have a normal arch, and the shoe does work with its width for my foot anatomy. So if you're similar, true to size should be a safe call. Now, if you have a 3 or 4E width foot or wider, I would say probably pass on the shoe. Also, if you have a flatter foot and you don't like arch in your shoes, pass on this model as well. You're going to feel this medial sidewall. In my opinion, it's going to press into your foot. It's likely going to be uncomfortable. So definitely food for thought there. But overall, true to size should be the safe call in this shoe for most lifters and athletes. For my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.85 ounces. The heel to toe drop in this shoe is 7 millimeters, and this model has a thin foam removable insole. All right, so now let's break down the construction of the On Cloud X4. Up here on the forefoot, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up. And then looking at the toe box of this shoe, we have a light internal toe guard that wraps the entirety of this toe box. As you can see, it has a bit of structure here. Then we have this recycled breathable mesh that runs through the forefoot into the midfoot. And then we have this textile and synthetic overlay that wraps the entirety of the midfoot back here into the heel. You have some On branding here on the lateral side, some On branding back here in the heel. And this heel cup is a little bit more structured than the prior model, in my opinion. You also have this TPU wrap that comes up a little bit to help it provide additional structure as well. You have the star lacing system down here, and once again you can start to get a folding of material down here because these eyelets pull this material over itself when you tighten the shoe up a little bit more. Looking at the midfoot, you have 5 core eyelets that go up with a 6 back here for lace lock. You have a padded mesh tongue in the shoe with a loop here for additional security. You have some On Cloud X branding here on the tongue as well. And this tongue is gusseted, so it doesn't slide a ton even when you wear them loose, which I personally really like for more casual wear contexts. Looking at the midsole of this shoe, you have that Helion Super Foam midsole that runs throughout. Again, it does have a softer and plusher feel to it, hence why I don't love this shoe for lifting, but for lighter stuff, it can work. And it does have a nice plush and responsive feel to it. This model also has that reworked X-shaped Speedboard that gives this forefoot a little bit more maneuverability. This model does feel a little bit more flexible and playful and athletic compared to the prior iterations, which I personally like. And then looking at the outsole in this shoe, you have a rubber tread that covers the forefoot and back here in the heel. You still have that exposed foam here, so definitely keep that in mind if you're wearing these out and about in rain and mud. That can tend to break down foam and midsoles a little bit faster in training shoes that have exposed midsole foams. And then once again, this model does have a thin foam removable insole, but that pretty much wraps up the gist of this shoe's construction. If you have additional questions, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that wraps up my review of the On Cloud X4. Now, would I buy this shoe again? Probably not. I think for the price, if I'm going to invest $150 into a training shoe, I'm going with something that's a bit more specific and niche with the training to be able to perform at higher levels. This model is, again, great for generalists, and I think if you like On shoes, this shoe can be a really good bet. But it's not going to be your best training shoe, I think, for really sending it in the gym. There are issues that I think are still problematic with this training shoe line. I do like some of the rework and upgrades in this model, but again, the spillover issue, the Cloud Tech midsole not being the most stable, those are all things that kind of irk me with the shoe, and I think could be so much better and give On shoes way more range regarding their performance in the gym. But all that said, if you have additional questions on this review, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally on Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.